one on the lady. Let me turn this
Yes, and I'll pass it over appropriately. Okay, we're going to get started. Can they hear me? Can you hear me? Dr. Halpern, did I somehow get your glasses on my? These are not yours. That's just, they were hanging from my. Dr. Goldsmith, are these yours?
No, he has glasses on. These were hanging on the microphone.
I just noticed them hanging on my microphone. But even more so, I can't get this started. I need to start. Yeah,
really
but when
low.
I'm speaking, it doesn't.
It should pick up.
Testing, testing. Oh, it's. It's okay.
I'll turn you up back there.
Testing, testing. No. Turn me up. Yeah, you're not. You can sit down until. Testing. Oh, thank you. Okay, we're going to get started. I'd like to thank you all for attending this year's, which I believe is the 4th annual Yom Hashoah event here at New York Medical College. A most important event. So I believe it's fitting to just give you all a big thanks for making the effort to come here today. Before we get started, I actually wanted to pitch a second Yom HaShoah event we're going to be doing in May 15th. There will be a screening of the movie Big Sonia, which is about a Holocaust survivor and what she does and turns her life experiences into related to rehabilitation of prisoners and motivational speaking in general relate for children. And it's an extremely inspirational story. There will be a panel discussion following the screening, and CME credits are pending. So we're looking to get CME credits for that activity as well. So tonight's the order of events will include a couple candle lightings, a keynote speaker. As you can see the presentation up above, we've invited Dr. Lozman to speak today on the work he's been doing, and some closing remarks from Rabbi Krupka and closing prayer. So to get it started, I'd like to invite Ann Bajewski to do the candle lighting and prayer. Ann is the professor and director of the Touro Institute on Human Rights and the Holocaust. Thank you, Ann.
Should say can you hear me? I better, just a minute, sorry. How's that? Can you hear me at the back? Microphone higher. Okay. How's that? Is that better? The Institute on Human Rights and the Holocaust will also be having a Yom HaShoah event on Yom HaShoah this week on May 2nd. And it's at lunchtime. If you just happen to be free, you're welcome to join us. We will have a survivor of one of the camps and the deputy ambassador of Israel to the United Nations. So you're more than welcome. If you'd like to come, please, by all means, just let me know after we're done. This prayer is composed by the chief rabbi for Yom HaShoah of Israel. Today in Yom HaShoah, on this week on Yom HaShoah, we remember the victims of the greatest crime of man against man, the young, the old, the innocent, the 1.5 million children starved, shot, given lethal injections, gassed, burned, and turned to ash because they were deemed guilty of the crime of being different. We remember what happens when hate takes hold of the human heart and turns it to stone. What happens when victims cry for help and there is no one listening? What happens when humanity fails to recognize that those who are not in our image are nonetheless in God's image? We remember and pay tribute to the survivors who bore witness to what happened and to the victims so that robbed of their lives, they would not be robbed also of their deaths. We remember and give thanks for the righteous of the nations who saved lives, often at risk of their own, teaching us how in the darkest night we can light a candle of hope. This week on Yom HaShoah, we call on you, Almighty God, to help us hear your voice that says in every generation, do not murder, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor, do not oppress the stranger. We know that whilst we do not have the ability to change the past, we can change the future. We know that whilst we cannot bring the dead back to life, we can ensure their memories live on and their deaths were not in vain. And so, this year on Yom HaShoah, we commit ourselves to one simple act, Yitzchor, remember. May the souls of the victims be bound in the bond of everlasting life. Amen. I think in view of the events of the last couple of days, and it's behold to me to say just a couple more words. Some of the survivors of the attack in California had survived Palestinian attacks in Sderot, only to become victims again of anti-Semitism in America. In the last couple of days, the New York Times published a viciously anti-Semitic cartoon which suggested that the President of the United States is a puppet of the State of Israel. A few weeks before that, a Democratic member of the US Congress and on the House Foreign Affairs Committee suggested also that the Jewish Americans have doubtful allegiance to this country, having previously said that Israel hypnotizes the world. The Nuremberg Tribunal told us that crimes are committed by men, not by abstract entities. So we won't defeat anti-Semitism unless we name names, unless we hold individuals and organizations accountable. Fortunately, we live in a free country, and we can and must do just that. So I think if you're asking yourselves what, as young people and others, we can do for lessons learned of the Holocaust, it is to hold modern-day anti-Semites accountable. We light this yellow candle to rekindle God's flame, to shine his light upon the world once again, to sanctify the memories of the millions of souls, to honor their prayers and all their lost goals. We bless their existence by being alive, to light this yellow candle as proof we survived.
Okay, and now I'd like to invite New York Medical College Chancellor and Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Halpern.
When I was a little boy, we were driving back to our home in Somerville, New Jersey from Jersey City, and I must have been in the back of the car on Route 22, And there must have been some kind of family argument at my grandfather's house about something relatively minor. And I said as a child to my mother, boy, that was quite an argument the family had. And my mother, who was a very taciturn woman, said, that's not an argument in the family. An argument in the family is 1943, 44, 45, where your uncle so-and-so said to your cousin so-and-so, when you came to America, you were supposed to bring Tanta Slava with you when you left her behind. And the Germans got her. That's an argument. And it was my introduction to the raw nerves of victimhood and comparative injury. And that's why there's all these candles here. My wife, who runs the Holocaust Speakers Bureau, has told me all about the issue of, well, you were on kinder transport, you weren't in the camps, or you got sent to England when you were 6 and you didn't survive Bergen-Belsen, people comparing degrees of injury. But I don't think there's much profit in that. I think what we need to talk about is the commonality of human suffering. And I bought all these little candles about 2 weeks ago in case anyone wants to come up and light a candle in memory of a member of their family who was left behind. In a minute, I'll invite people to come up and do that. But in a conversation with Rabbi Krupke yesterday, I ended up with these. But the problem is, I wrote to you this earlier today in my message to the campus, is Columbine, Parkland, Aurora, Las Vegas, Orlando, Pittsburgh, Sri Lanka, Christchurch, now the suburbs of San Diego. How many yahrzeit candles was I going to buy? Now you look up on Wikipedia, like I did on after Shabbos was over on Saturday night. Mass shootings in the United States. For God's sake, there's a Wikipedia articles about this with tables per year in the United States now, with the number of killed and the number of wounded. So maybe we'll say San Diego, Christchurch, Sri Lanka, Pittsburgh, with the understanding that unfortunately there could be 20 more or 30 more or 50 more. And as I wrote to you in my message to the campus, apathy about this is a 4-letter word. Better as a community do something about it. Anyone wants to come up and join me? This is for the Nechemsky family. For my wife's cousin. Please, if you want to come up and light a candle.
So, good afternoon. Okay. Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. You'll have to excuse my voice. For whatever reason, I'm a little hoarse today. My name is Jay Goldsmith, and I am the founding dean of the dental school, Dean Emeritus, founding dean. And a couple of years ago, it was my pleasure to receive an email from someone I didn't know by the name of Dr. Michael Lozman. And he said he was very proud that we were building a new dental school and that he had collected antiquities, principally in the dental field, for about 50 years. And would I be interested? He was remodeling his office where he had them, and would I be interested? And every dental school that I had seen or been involved with always had some kind of museum of interesting artifacts, mostly in the dental field. And so I went up on a train to Latham because his office is just outside of Albany, and I was amazed because he had all this fabulous antiquities that were museum quality, and he was looking for a new home. And I said to him, we would be thrilled to make a home for everything that you've saved. So that started it. And then I found out later on, and I'll just read you a little bit, but I found out later on that he also does a number of very interesting things and is really a very committed person. And just a few things about Michael. He was born in Brooklyn, and he went to Wilkes College, Fairleigh Dickinson University, the dental school, and the graduate training in orthodontics. He's an orthodontist. And he lives in the New York area. One of his daughters is with him today, Robin, who's also an orthodontist with him in Latham. And in 2001, he decided to undertake the preservation of Eastern European Jewish cemeteries, destroyed during the Holocaust by the invading Nazis during the war, and has to date restored 15 cemeteries, 10 in Belarus, 5 in Lithuania, with more planned on the way. The idea was, his objectives were to preserve the cemeteries from obliteration, safeguard the names and resting places of the families of whose Jews murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, and preserve Jewish heritage. He brought students with him to help facilitate this and do the work. Currently, he's working on a construction of a Holocaust museum in Albany, New York. In Albany, New York. This really blew me away when I heard about this. Everything is important. This was, to me, amazing. And he's been working on this for quite a long time now, nearly 2 decades. He's the founder of 2 organizations, the Restoration of European Jewish Cemeteries and the Capital District Joint Holocaust Museum. And he's the president of both of them. As an orthodontist, he is deeply involved with his chosen healthcare field, as I explained to you already, and his office, which was opened in 1970. He continues to work a full schedule. The museum, which we've already put some of the exhibits in the museum. It's on the 3rd floor of the dental school. And he continues to work a full schedule. The dental museum is actually in our waiting area. It's his collection, and he donated it to our school. And so my hat off, in that regard, my hat's off to a dear friend, Dr. Michael Lozman. I will also tell you that in the dental field, he's been president of so many organizations, the local district organizations and others as well. I think he's been an alternate delegate to the ADA in Chicago. He's on the Board of Governors of the state of New York, the New York State Board of Dentistry, as well as the disciplinary committee, on and on and on. You can go on and on about individuals who are accomplished. And so I'll just introduce him by saying, Michael Lozman, a very accomplished man. Michael? Do you have it? Oh, you're okay with that, okay.
Well, thank you all, and it certainly is a pleasure to be here. Um, Jay explained to you how we came to know each other. I do want to tell you that he is an amazing person. He's truly a treasure, and his accomplishments are remarkable, blow us all away. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit of history, how this work, the work that we did, came to be. I do have a good number of slides to show you. I don't want to keep you too late. I'll try to get through them rapidly, but I think a little bit of history is really important. Back in 2001, I went to visit the village that my father was born at, Sapotskin, in those days, Poland, but now Belarus. And when we saw the Jewish cemetery, it was really quite appalling to see the state that it was in. There were animals tethered on it. It was unkept. In those days, the Jewish cemeteries were on the outskirts of the villages, and with the Jews having been killed and hardly anybody coming back to take care of the cemeteries, they really turned out to be disastrous areas and were slowly disappearing into the forest. So in Sapotskin, I went to visit the mayor of the village and said, I really want to come back and do something about preserving the cemetery. And he said, sure, come back, knowing he was talking to another tourist. But I returned 2 weeks later, and having done a pit stop at Home Depot and brought some equipment with me. And when I returned, he was so shocked that he offered me 6 maintenance men, and we had a work crew, and we started the project of restoration. Similar to other cemeteries, it's quite large, and all we could do was touch the surface of it. But the recognition that all the other cemeteries in Eastern Europe, everywhere, were in a similar state of decay, and understanding that the Jews were killed, most of the synagogues were destroyed. The only evidence, almost, of Jews having been there were the cemeteries, and we're at risk of losing them as well. So I felt that something should be done, and I undertook it as a project. I'd like to tell you about my experience at the first village I was at, Sapotskin. As indicated, I've done 10 in Belarus, then we moved to Lithuania where we did 5. Because of the similarities that we experienced, except for one minor glitch on our first cemetery, which was a little disheartening, but I'll tell you about that as well. So to make this happen, I thought it would be a great project if we took college students along. As it turned out, that's a rather unique experience. And it took me about a year of discussions with our first college, Dartmouth College. And I brought along one of the Hillel rabbis with me, and we took a preliminary trip to Sapotskin, and they decided that all would be okay. And so we formulated a trip whereby the students would participate in the restoration. Now, restoration is not really just a cleanup. The purpose of the objective of our work is to find those cemeteries which were most easily on their way to destruction, those cemeteries that did not have fences around them, that could easily dissolve into the surrounding territory. And our objective was to install an iron fence around the cemetery to preserve its identity. That was the main goal. And following that, we would then go inside and clean up the cemetery, upright fallen gravestones. And when we arrived at all of these cemeteries, they were disasters, and we left as best we could make them. They were a showpiece. So the preservation and the preservation of history, heritage, and the names of the families and those killed. Keep in mind that all this is about the Holocaust. If there was no Holocaust, this work would not be necessary. It's only because of the Holocaust, the absence of Jews returning to take care of their family cemeteries, that this work becomes necessary. Think of your own family cemetery. think of the care that's put into it and ask yourself why all this care. Well, it is for the same reason that the Jews were killed, and then it really becomes our responsibility to take that next step. So the story is that first step was to meet with the administration of the village. And Belarus is a little different. Belarus is run by a man by the name of Lukashenko, who is about as close to the Stalin mentality as you can get. Consequently, there's a paranoia that exists in that country. And so you just don't do something. Nobody does anything unless they get okay from a higher authority, maybe going all the way up to the top, I don't know. But we approached the village, and I met with the mayor and sat down with him and said, here we are, I want to bring students along. And I had to convince them, basically, it's really a question of person-to-person contact, that we were legitimate. This is what we're okay. And he trusted that. And I also met with the school principal and explained that we want this to be an educational program, so that we wanted to bring students along to meet with their students and not necessarily talk about our country, although it always turned out to be that way, but to explain what the Holocaust was about and why we were here because of the Holocaust. Keeping in mind, too, that although the Holocaust is becoming ancient history in our country, with the rise of deniers, it's even getting worse. It certainly is ancient history there as far as, in my opinion, they're concerned. This is all really history that they really don't want dredged up into the current thinking. And here we were, putting it back in their face that we were bringing college students over to restore a Jewish cemetery that was destroyed because of the Nazis. So having gotten through the mayor and gotten through the principal, we brought our students over and developed a program that we continued on through all of almost 13 of the 15 cemeteries that we did. And that is, the first step is that our students engaged in Holocaust studies in their college. Secondly, the first stop is to Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland, where they do a tour of the concentration camp. They visit massacre sites. From there, we then travel to the country where we're going to be working. Of course, bear in mind, it takes a year of preliminary work to get all this behind us. They go to the country where we're going to be working. Then we get involved with the local school. We have meetings in the auditoriums. Invariably, there are questions and answers about our country. And we actually become goodwill ambassadors for the United States. So our role in these countries is extremely important. How we present ourselves is important. Our behavior is important. But the reason for that we're being there is something that we want to be sure that everyone is aware of. And they are aware. We invite them to volunteer. When we are completed with the cemetery, we have a dedication service, and we invite all of the village and the students to attend. Our students do homestays in the villages to try to make a warmer, closer connection. And it's interesting to see how many volunteers indeed do come. Our work has been written up in their local newspapers, their national newspapers, and it's been written up internationally as well. So the reason for this explanation was the same kind of pattern has taken place in the other cemeteries. Interestingly, in all the work we've done, we have not yet encountered any anti-Semitic overt behavior. That's not to say it doesn't exist. Their thinking doesn't exist, but they were very welcoming to us. And in fact, in almost every village that we completed our restoration work, the mayors came up to me at the end and apologized that we had to come such a long distance to do this work when they indeed should have been doing it. And they promised me that they will have their students involved with continued maintenance of the cemetery when we are there. So what do the students do? Well, they dig the holes for the iron. We have an iron fence. We have a foundry that constructs an iron fence for us in 9-foot segments. Students arrive, they dig the holes for the fence around the perimeter of the cemetery. We mix the cement, install the fence, and then look for gravestones that have fallen, many that are hidden under the surface. It's been 70 some odd years, and we upright them. And all the time we're engaging more and more with the village as we're doing this. It's really been quite a remarkable experience. It's been a life-changing experience for all of the students. The little glitch I tell, well, let me come back and be absolutely totally above board. I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I had no experience in mixing cement. I mean, this was really great. It was a great experiment, but with each succeeding cemetery, things were improving, they were getting better, and I was proud, always proud of what we accomplished, and the sense and the feeling of warmth and affection by the people in the village. So what's the little glitch that we had on our first visit, which was a minor thing, but almost did a job on all of us. And that is that while we were working, this man and woman come up to us, seeking out the leader of the group, which was me. And we have students and we have faculty along as well. And they come up to me and they announce that they are KGB. KGB, lovely. And what was the problem? The problem was that we were breaking the law by being there. Well, they wanted our passports and wanted us to come down to headquarters. So that was interesting. It was a late Friday afternoon. That's important because nobody wants to stay too late. And what they wanted us to do was to sign a declaration. By the way, it's the first and only time this has ever happened. They wanted us to sign a declaration that we were breaking the law. And we were in their office. It was myself and Hillel Rabbi, one of the students, and just the three of us were there. And I explained to whoever he was in his room that we could not have been breaking the law because on our way into Sapotkin and on our way out of Sapotkin, we were stopped on the highway by highway authorities, and they wanted to know what we were going to do in Sapotkin as we entered. And then as we left, they wanted to know what we did in Sapotkin. And each time we told them we were going there to restore the cemetery. So I said, it's impossible. How could we have broken the law when your own people allowed us to go through knowing full what we were doing? With that, he gave us back our passports, and that was that. It was a moment that I did not want to repeat. A little bit frightening for sure, but all was well. The second cemetery and all the other cemeteries, we never had that issue. The reason it happened at Sapotkin is because it's the border village to Poland. Actually, Sapotkin used to be part of Poland. Being a border village, the military was there and they had all these great concerns about what life would, they wanted to be sure that they were secure. Consequently, that's why this happened. We did have guides that took us in. We always had translators. We always had guides. The guides, if they had done their job correctly, should have anticipated this, but they didn't, and we went onward. So I'd like to show you some slides of the work that we did and give you a sense of how we progressed from there. However, keeping in mind that this is Yom HaShoah, and keeping in mind that it is the Holocaust that has been responsible for all the work that we did. I want to start out our presentation by talking about the Holocaust. Working with students, not only from the United States, but in Eastern Europe, truly it seems that the Holocaust is becoming ancient history, and that is too bad. Because if we don't learn from the past, as you know, history has this nasty sense of repeating itself, and there is so much to learn so that this doesn't happen. So teaching about the Holocaust is critical. I'd like to start out with this because, as we know, during Yom HaShoah, we should remember the Holocaust and those Jews that were killed and so many other people during the Nazi era were killed. But remembering implies more than just remembering. It requires that some action be taken. Just to remember is not doing the job. Remembering has to bring with it action. And this is what I'm going to hope to appeal to the young people here, the leaders of tomorrow, that you will undertake the actions that are brought forth by remembrance. This is how it started. And here, as you all know. We show the students the newspaper headlines, it brings closer to reality what we're talking about. It's not just that we're talking about it. They can actually see it in their newspaper headlines that Poland and Denmark and France and Brussels and Holland and Russia, Yugoslavia, they can, when you see this, you can put your finger on it. It becomes more of a personal issue. In Lithuania, I've traveled extensively through Belarus and through Lithuania, and there were Jewish communities in everywhere you go. These are all Jewish villages. I can tell you that in Lithuania, the Germans came in and they gave the Lithuanians instructions on what to do. And the Lithuanians were so complicit, they did a pretty good job. 95% of the Jewish population in Lithuania was killed by the Lithuanians. When you scratch the surface, though, and this is the thing that I think that really strikes home to me, as these were ordinary people. Germans were ordinary people. They allowed themselves to be involved, to believe what they were being told. In Lithuania, the people that come with are fine people, so to speak. What they were then, who knows? But they were ordinary people. And yet they allowed themselves that evil because they were convinced by some charismatic leader that this was the right thing to do. And as I said before, the responsibility of remembering is more than just remembering. It's a call to action. It is understanding how ordinary people can be convinced to do this kind of thing. Ordinary people, here they are, soldiers going to a concert, Bach, Beethoven, ballet. Look at this fine-looking young man here giving this Korean girl a Stradivarius violin. Goebbels, the chief of propaganda, who twisted the minds of so many children to make them believe in the Hitler mentality that Jews were animals and did not deserve to live. This is how they got to them. This is the future of the Nazis. And you look carefully, the adoration, ordinary people. Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was almost like the beginning of the Holocaust. It gave the country the understanding, the feeling that the regime was supportive of the destruction of Jews. And they went to smashing the windows, Kristallnacht, the night of glass, smashing the windows of the shopkeepers. There are approximately 100 Jews that were killed on that particular night, but the message was clear. And it was just another year or two when 30,000 Jews were lined up and they were taken to concentration camps. And before you knew it, 6 million Jews were killed. And this is why it's important to meet with students. This is why it's important to give the message. This is why it's important to talk to the communities here and in Europe. But lest we think that we are safe here, that we can be complacent, we can't. You read the newspapers just the other day. This is what is happening. You can't deny that inherent in our daily life, we are seeing activities of this sort. And we just saw that sign. This is here in America. Hard to believe. And we need to all speak up. Remember, the young people here today are the leaders of tomorrow. Complacency will not work. On a more personal level, these are my grandparents and an aunt in Sapotskin. And this is my father. My father was lucky to have come to the United States prior to the destruction. But nevertheless, we lost many family members, uncles, aunts. But again, to make it more personal, this is not my family, but this is a family group picture before the Holocaust. Look carefully. And these are the three that existed and were alive after the Holocaust, the ones with the blue marks on their shirts. The one in the center, her son is a member of our board, that we have in the construction of our Holocaust memorial. Genocide follows a pretty standard routine. 8 stages, yes, but this is what we have to be careful of. It's us and them. They're different than we are. Symbols, what kind of, the humanity of them, less than what we are. Organized, yes. Propaganda, yes. Separation of them from us. Think about what's happening in the world today. And this is part of the demonization of the Jews, the caricatures that were made that they are not worth, they're different from how we are. Jews are forbidden. Propaganda everywhere. Even the little children could not survive. They had to wear yellow stars because they were different. But ordinary people in their towns and their villages allowed for this kind of thing to happen. Of course, you know they're in ghettos. This is in Krakow. There was, of course, a mezuzah here. And when they were rounded up and taken into the ghettos, many of them took their mezuzahs with them, not understanding or believing what could possibly happen to them. And this is life in the ghetto. Dehumanizing them, had to walk on different streets. We couldn't share the same road. We can't forget. Separation of the children. Did it make any difference? Not at all. Not at all. As hard as it is to believe it, it was really not all that long ago. 70 some odd years is not long. The use of trains during the Nazi era was extremely important. It's estimated that about 4 million of the 6 million Jews that were killed by transport of the trains. I tell you that because initially the trains were to play an important part in the memorial that we were constructing. But the trains and the tracks have become icons of the Holocaust, and people actually lay flowers there as a result of that. They would pack hundreds into a car, no food, no water, cattle cars for hours and days to transport them. Hard to believe that a ship carrying refugees to the United States, 2,000, were not allowed to enter, turned away. A bill was attempted to be passed in the United States, granting immigrant status to 20,000 refugee children. It died in Congress. Hard to believe. This is also shocking. You can check it out yourself on the internet. Who would have believed this? I was shocked when I saw this. Inevitably, Auschwitz was just one of the concentration camps, but inevitably they all found their death there. The entrance to Auschwitz, that sign says, "Work brings freedom." That was their joke. There was no freedom after this, and there was nothing but slave labor. In some of the concentration camps, they actually had orchestras, bands playing for them as they arrived. Another joke on their part. But inevitably, this is what it led to. When they disembarked from the trains, they were told to bring their luggage with them and round it up. And the men on one side, the women on the other side. And that is when they had the separation process. Went to the right or you went to the left. You went in one direction, you're going directly to the gas chamber. When the other direction, you're going to the barracks where you become slave labor. If you look carefully at this picture, the average lifespan for the prisoner in Auschwitz concentration camp in the work area was 4 to 5 months. This man with the cane and the others that went to the gas chamber, their average lifespan was 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours from that moment, that man will be dead. They were told to put their names on their luggage. They had to be organized. They didn't want chaos. They were told to write their names on their suitcases and told that afterwards, after they go to the showers, they can come back and get their luggage and the material. That's why you see these names there. Of course, that never happened. The luggage was left on the train tracks. You need to visit Auschwitz and the other concentration camps. Everyone in the world needs to visit the concentration camps, not just for the brutality of it, for the recognition of what you have to be careful about. The dehumanization, taking away one's identity, give them numbers instead of names. They were meaningless. They were not real people. What happened to them, nobody cared about. And then when that happens, think about the 8 stages of genocide. When that happens, they are no longer of value. There's no reason to keep them alive. This is a drawing from Auschwitz that was some child had put on the wall. What she saw looking out the window. And this is how people lived, when they lived, as they lived, for that brief period of time in the barracks. This actually comes from Yad Vashem, the major Holocaust memorial in Israel. And this is what I think has inspired me to continue on with my work, because truly, this is what it really is. They deserve to have their names, their family names maintained, their names and their family names. And by preserving the cemeteries, by uprighting the stones, by archiving the names on the stones, at the very least, we're attempting to do that. This is a little girl that wrote her name, maybe for the same reason. The final solution, as you know, consisted of putting them into the gas chambers and throwing these cans through the roof. This is a drawing that was made by a concentration camp survivor, showing how they're going into the gas chamber, and these are their clothes that they had removed because they were going to be showered for lice, so they were told. And these are the gas chambers. And as a tourist, you can go inside. You can see, close your eyes, get a sense of the horror that undertook these Jews. And this is a crematorium right adjacent to the gas chamber. Not all the Jews were killed in concentration camps. For many, they were marched along a pathway into the forest, forced to dig their own graves or pits, line up on the pits, and you all know this, and they were shot. And these paths into the forest are all over Eastern Europe. Usually they're about 1,500 feet long. And when you come to the end of them, that's where they lied. We're going to go back to that in a few moments. So what became of the Jewish cemeteries in the absence of Jews? This is what they look like. This is what we see when we travel in Belarus and Lithuania and anywhere else you go in Eastern Europe, you will see the same thing. This is a remainder. This is the reminder that there were some Jews there. There was not a Jewish civilization. This is what we're trying to change. Many graves have been opened looking for gold, Jewish jewelry, rings. It's important to see this, to give you an understanding of what there is today, what exists and what we have to fight against. There's very little regard for the cemeteries, or they dig up things for sewer pipes and bones. Elsewhere, no regard. No matter what they say, if they go to a country and they say, we have laws against using Jewish cemeteries for commercial purposes, you see all over. They put soccer fields on. These are gravestones in the back of somebody's yard. These are a bunch of gravestones that were used for constructing a wall. There's no sense of what it means to us. This are piles and piles of Jewish gravestones. So to do our work required my first visiting the villages, and as I indicated, to speak with the mayors and the principals of the schools. Sometimes it's rather unpleasant, especially when you get there in March and it's cold and wet. And this is a picture of our one of my visits with the school principal and the mayor, and the tea and coffee and goodies, and everybody has been very friendly. It's been extremely welcoming by the schools and the mayors. This is one of the mayors. I just want to take a second. I have more slides to show you, but this is an interesting story. When I walked in his office, my hearing is not very good, and it's important for me to be able to make a communication with them. I want to bond with them. I want them to sense that we're there for a good purpose. Remember, this is Belarus with that mentality I was telling you about. We walked into his office, and the first thing he does is turn the radio up. And I knew I was in trouble when he did that, because I can barely, not that, even through the interpreter, I didn't want that kind of noise. I asked if he would turn the radio down. He said no. I said, why not? He said, because they will hear us out there. He was afraid. We were an American coming into his office. He was afraid that somebody would hear a communication that we were having. It just gives you an indication of the kind of mentality that we were up against. When we have our students come to a village, we try to seek out the older residents to talk to them about what they remember life was like in the village. And I can tell you that it brings tears to their eyes every single time. This is something they've repressed for all these years that they can remember since they were children. And now they volunteer to vocalize and explain to the students what life was like. It's a very moving experience. They're very proud of their role in the war effort. And he is talking to the students about his experiences. This being a dentist, I couldn't resist this picture. I saw this guy walking down the road. I said, would you mind if I can take your picture? He was delighted, but that's a great picture. This is an original Shtetl House in the Jewish, the Jewish communities were outside the village. They were all compacted together, but this is one of the few existing original Shtetl houses. I want you to pay particular attention to the three openings. One's a window, two are doors. They weren't allowed to get involved with the professions and ownership of any stores and so on. So what they would do is they would sell goods out of their houses. The door on the right of the picture is just, they would just open it and they would sell items to the community. That's how they made a living. These are homes in Belarus that have been reconstructed, but interestingly, many of them are on the street leading to the Jewish cemeteries. So there were Jewish homes there. Interesting how they've maintained the three windows along the road. This is a picture that I took in Shereshova. I saw these guys watching us work. By the way, I'm there for the entire duration. From the day we get there and till the day we leave the cemetery restoration project, I'm there for the full thing. These people are watching us, and I figured, that would be a great photo. I thought they looked kind of grim, so I asked if they would mind, and it kind of lightened the day up. Being Eastern European myself, I figured I'd fit right in. So that was an experience. We always get involved with the schools because we want the students to learn about our country and about the work that we are doing. The first most important thing with the students is to get involved with athletics. For example, a soccer game. And when we start, they are intimidated by us. Our students are intimidated by them. When we are finished with the game, everybody's friends. It's amazing what that can do. We meet with their assemblies, and as I indicated, we have a question and answer period. It's very interesting to have a question and answer period in their assemblies. You would think they would ask you, well, what do you think about the President of the United States? They don't. They ask you, what do you do on a Saturday? It's a very interesting person-to-person kind of relationship. We always give a gift to the local school. That's the principal. This is the dean, one of the deans in Siena, giving a gift to the principal there. We were invited to the graduations, which were lovely to see, and that's me standing there. And just to give you an idea of the warmth that of their invitation to us, you can see that they presented me with some flowers. We sponsor an essay contest. The essay has to, within the school, and they have to connect the Holocaust, their village, and their country, and put them all together. And it's a school-wide essay contest. The school selects the top three winners, and then we have a banquet where we award prizes to them. Why do we do this? We do this because we want them to go back to the books. We want them to learn about the Holocaust. This young lady here, beautiful, beautiful young lady, she wrote her essay in English, her second language, and she really laced into her countrymen for the horror that this was in Lithuania, for their complicity in what occurred to the Jews. At the end of the dedication service, they had a band prior to our banquet, and it was a very wonderful experience. So to make it all happen, I took some trips to the foundry and designed a fence. We always work on a shoestring budget, but in spite of that, it's an extremely expensive project, extremely expensive. When you factor in the cost of the fence, the travel, the hotels, and everything else. And this is what the fence looked like. We wanted it to have a Jewish star, Star of David, in the fence so that the fence could not be used for their own personal purposes. The work is hard. The work on the cemetery is hard. And the students that come know this ahead of time, and they are remarkable. This girl, she's Muslim. Her father met me at Newark Airport as we were all meeting to take off. And he told me to please take care of her, that she never in her life ever held a shovel. I can tell you, you couldn't stop this girl from working. Shovels, there was no end to it. She was incredible. And this is a good part of the work. The gravestones in Eastern Europe, where we were particularly, are not the kinds of stones we're used to. They are stones. They're monstrous. And many of them are worn by the weather, but we tried to upright them, and you can see how much effort goes into them. The interesting thing, almost the ironical thing, is that the stones that are buried in the ground and you upright them, the writing is quite clear. The ones that are upright, the writing is terrible. And so you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? But it's important to do this here to be able to archive this information. We send it to Jewish Gen, and they maintain that. But this is the work that's being done, and we do as much repair as we can. Here's one of the neighbors, one of the women that came on her own to plant that plant there. And when we have our dedication service, we invite anyone and everyone that is there to speak. And she gave the most eloquent speech at the dedication service. Of course, it's all translated by our translator, but it was eloquent. It's interesting to see volunteers come and participate and help us. These are all these children are doing their thing. This woman, the students actually visited her home, and she decided on her own that she wanted to come visit the cemetery where we were doing working. Those are Siena students. By the way, Siena College is a Catholic school, and when we went 3 years in a row, and I was the only Jew, and you couldn't ask for a harder group of workers. I mean, they really rolled their sleeves up and were tremendous workers. So most of our student trips, half are men, half are women, and composed of Jews and non-Jews. Anyway, this woman had somebody drive her to the cemetery. The students met her there, and she was deeply emotional about this experience. She brought with her some flowers in her left hand, and she decided she wanted to lay flowers at one of these. Now, and I want you to look at what struck me, at her face and the students' faces, and the care that both of these students are having. All this warmth, you can see it coming from them for this old woman that wanted to come to the cemetery. And she laid her flowers by these stones here, and it was a very moving experience. In Lithuania, no, this one in Belarus, Rubizoveci, which is they have a water mill. These are stone mills that were used for gravestones. We've never seen anything like that before, but many of them have writing on it. I do want to share this with you. It's an interesting story. We went to visit a cemetery, although staying in Belarus was important, going to Lithuania was a requirement because of the Lukashenko, the president. But I didn't want to go into too many other places because it takes you have to build up credibility. It's not that you walk into a country and say, here I am, I'm an American, I want to do this. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of behind the scenes work that is required. But we did go to visit a cemetery in Poland. And I contacted Rabbi Michael Shudrick, who's the chief rabbi of Poland, and told me we were coming there. And he said, that's fine, do what you want to do. But I want to send someone along to accompany you to make sure that you are within the boundaries of the cemetery. Now, I need to tell you this. There are certain halakhic requirements that we try to follow. One is there is no work done on Saturday, Shabbat. Two is that if we don't know where the gravestone belongs, we don't put it anywhere. We put it on the perimeter of the cemetery. And three is that, as best as we can, we stay within the known boundaries of the cemetery. We don't always know that. Remember, no Jews have been around, so the farms have used up these things. Oftentimes there are roads that demarcate it. But he felt that he had a way to deal with this. So we met him. He spent an overnight at a hotel. And I figured, how is he going to do this? Well, it's very interesting. He has in his hand divining rods. And his objective here was to walk around what he believed to be the perimeter of the land. And his divining rods would tell him, by the way they would cross, where the cemeteries were and were not. I can also tell you that what we knew is that there was a very small playground. By the way, this land is all owned by the Catholic Church. That there's a very small Catholic playground that the Catholic Church built on what was the existing Jewish cemetery. The question was it anywhere? The Catholic Church insisted it was not, but he wanted to find out. So he went around the perimeter and walked all over and walked far end here and far end there. And I walked with him because I thought this was absolutely phenomenal. And when we got back, and I had to play with this, I had to figure out how it works. I couldn't, but we got back, he figured he knew what the perimeters were. And then the following day, we had a meeting with the local administration, and they said, well, we have a surprise for you. And with that, they brought out an aerial photo of the Jewish cemetery that was taken before it was converted into a playground. And guess what? It was the playground. The playground was exactly where the Jewish cemetery was. So here we are working on the fence, and it's a heavy wrought iron fence, and the students are busy laying it on the perimeter, digging the holes. And a horse and wagon turned out to be really essential in a number of these places. I'll go through these rapidly. It's yours truly again. And mixing cement was an interesting experience. It wasn't long before we learned that we can have pre-mixed cement. And how does pre-mixed cement get to us? They mix it somewhere else outside the village, load it all into a truck, drive it to us at the cemetery, and we take it off. This is all pre-mixed. Take it off the truck and put it around the fence. Well, you would think that would be so simple. Well, it's not so simple. That cement is starting to set up, and we have to fight the clock. So what do? Well, we take all these pails, and we're quickly loading the cement into the pails. You know how heavy a pail of cement is, and we're walking around and dumping it into the holes, but this is really an organized chaos here, trying to get the cement out of the back of the truck before it sets up. But we did it successfully more times you can imagine. When we get all finished, we have a welder that comes to weld, and when we are done, it starts to really look very nice. It's an established fence that goes all around the cemetery. If it's not pre-painted, the students will paint it, and quite the experience. This is the list of cemeteries that we've done. And I want to go back to Sapotskin, my father's village, just to show you what was on my mind when I arrived there. There I am sitting, saying, what are we going to do? And I approached the mayor, and he gave me, this is only one of the maintenance men. We had a crew of 6, and we did what we could. And I went to Home Depot and bought some tools, and I had these stars made in a local place in Albany, and brought it all with me, not the pipe, so I had that done there. And that's how we finished. When we brought the students, we had this tractor here mixing the cement the old way, and we put our first fence around Sapotskin, not the best fence that we've done by any means. And This is our group, the villagers and the volunteers and students and everybody else there. And you can still see behind them the Star of David's poster. So here's a list of the completed cemeteries. This was Sphere before and after, and you can see how much of a difference the work that we do makes. Spencionelli. I have to tell you about Spencionelli. Spencionelli, at the end of when we always have a dedication service when we finish the cemetery. We invite the village to come along, and the press was there, and this woman comes up to me. She speaks English. She must be about 50 years old. And after the dedication service, and she grabbed me, so it was a private moment, and she's crying and crying and crying, and she whispers to my ear. She said, every Sunday when I go to church, I pray for forgiveness for what we Lithuanians did to the Jews. Now, she saw me as a way of releasing this deep horror from her body, her brain, her mentality. I thought it was a tremendous responsibility how I would react to that. And what I did is I put my arms around her, I gave her a hug, I said, let's hope for a better tomorrow, and I think that satisfied her. This kind of personal involvement happened twice to me during the work we're doing. But the villages have always been very helpful and gratified by what we do. So just a few more cemeteries to show you. This is the Seelib. The work is intense. Now, Antipole is a story as well. When Antipole was one that was not done with students. That was an attorney in Philadelphia who called me and asked me if I would do a restoration on his family cemetery. And I said, of course I would. And when I got there, it had this road that went through the cemetery. And that was a problem for me because I've learned that if you interfere with traditional walkways, that might cause people to break down that section of the cemetery. They've been using it for years. So I approached the mayor. I said, what do we do about this road? Anticipating that he would say, we'll just build on the other side. He did not say that. He said, it's your cemetery, cut off the road. That's exactly what we did. And it was interesting coming from the mayor. And that is what we did. You can see when we got done, the gate goes right across the road. So one of my last remaining stories, almost, is that I told you about that man that wanted to turn the volume up. So we did go to a cemetery. And while we're looking at the cemetery, he said, I want to take you somewhere. I want to show you something. And we got in his car, and just a few minutes out of town, he stopped on the highway, and he took us to a path like I showed you before. And we walked to the end of it, and they had there a kind of memorial. And there are two mounds. You can't tell from the photographs, there are two mounds. And it was important for him that we see it, and important for us as well. But he happened to say that he had the names of the Jews that were killed there. Now that was shocking, because in all the years that we've been working, in all the places we've been, nobody had records. They asked us if we had anything to give them. And here the man is telling me we had their names. My comment to him was, if you have their names, then I want to come back and put up a memorial with their names, going back again to what David said, I only hope that somebody could remember my name. And he said that would be fine. So I said to him, can we go back to your office and give me a copy of the names? He said, yes, the names and their dates of birth. I said, can I have a copy of their names? And he said, no, true to form. And I said, why not? He said, well, if they stop you at customs and they see that you have a list of the names, they're going to want to know where you got it from. A little bit more craziness. I said, okay, I have a camera. Would you mind if I take a photograph of your list? He said, that you can do. Well, I did that. And on the plane home, I made a graph of how many people were there and what their dates of birth was, but mainly what age they were when they were killed. That was shocking. This is the existing memorial, and this is what I put together. And what made it shocking is that of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Jews that were killed, 75% were under the age of 17. They were 1 year old, 2 years of age, 3 years of age, 4 years of age, 5 years of age. That was shocking. That was shocking. You just wonder what could possibly have allowed ordinary people to allow for this kind of thing to happen. So I had a monument built, a memorial built with their names. And it was very moving. We had the press there. We had people all the way from Minsk, the capital of Belarus, come to visit. It was in the newspapers. That was my wife, who was sitting here with me. And it was a very moving experience when we were there. And I was glad I did that. That was my first memorial. Coming back to Albany, New York, after all these years of doing what we were doing, and realizing that the capital of New York did not have a suitable, if any, Holocaust memorial, I decided to undertake this project. Well, I'm not going to tell you about the craziness. I'm not going to tell you about the arguments and the controversies and all that. You don't have enough time today to listen to that. But I do want to share with you just a quick look at it. The first question is one of design. There's very little one can argue about when it comes to a memorial. Who in their right mind could say we should not have a memorial? Although I had a few not in their right mind say that. But the argument always seems to center around design. So I happened to catch a hold of this picture about design because design is, as you know, in the eyes of the beholder. Well, if you have a memorial and you have design, you can have controversy. All you have to do is look into the history. The World War II memorial, controversy. Emancipation Proclamation, controversy. Vietnam Memorial, controversy, and on and on and on. It's really a shame that you cannot do a good project without having so many glitches by virtue of controversy. To make the memorial, to broaden the scope of the memorial, I approached our local bishop and I said, wouldn't this be an interesting interfaith project? And we had several visits and talked about it, and he agreed that it would. And not only that, but he offered us property for the memorial. What makes this so important is not only that it's an interfaith project. Now keep in mind what I said. I've taken a number of times students from Catholic schools. Most of the students, half the students are not Jewish. Not only is it an interfaith project, but it's almost history in the making that the Catholic Church, because Catholics did not have a good record during the Holocaust, the Catholic Church and the Jewish community are joining together to build a Holocaust memorial. That is history in the making. And to let that go by would be a shame. For what value that has for the future, to mend fences, to bring people together, would be a shame. So he gave us the property, and we got to work. I got some architects together. Well, the first thing I did, we needed a design. So I created a model as a good starting point, met with various architects, got them on board. They all volunteered their time. We had some very high-power law firms in the area that volunteered their time. And we put together designs and diagrams, went to before the planning board where the community is, where the Catholic property is. And we got through the planning board by unanimous approval. It is now ready to go before the town board, which is quite different. And we know we're going to be getting unanimous approval there as well. But there we have another issue. They want to see more community support. So we've been spending a lot of time going out there and meeting with people and having various discussions. And in another several weeks, we'll be having a town board meeting. Why do we need a Holocaust memorial? Because it is becoming ancient history, and the deniers are gaining in population, and our survivors and children of survivors and the military that are engaged are leaving and dying out. And what will we have to talk about there? What we have to show. This is the design I put together. What I originally wanted was a railroad car. We talked about the role of the road. Trains, a fence around it, the kind of fence that we see in Auschwitz, and a giant wall that would represent the gas chamber, but that was not to be. This is what it would have looked like as a design. It turned out to be, after we brought in various groups and had a consensus and talked about it for a good number of months, we came up with it. This was the second design that I came up with. We came up with just to show you, this is the first design, just to show you the work that's been put into it. We came up with another design that seemed to satisfy the majority of organizations in the area. And this is an aerial view of it. It kind of looks like a Jewish star. It's about the size of it, the size of a roundabout. And if you look carefully at it, what you're seeing are the tops of 6 pillars, one for each of the 6 million Jews that were killed. And you can see how they're leaning inward. There's a sign, a sense of instability there. And around the periphery, there will be a variety of storytelling about what the Jews went through. And there'll be an indicator of Kristallnacht and a variety of other educational elements that go into making it as much of an educational experience as possible. Just to give you some quick looks as to what it looks like. So this is the design that will be going before the planning board. Before we do that, we're in 2 weeks from now, we're going to be having a committee hearing, not a committee hearing, community hearing in the local community, and inviting the community to voice their thoughts on it. But this is what the new design looks like. And God willing, we will have a Holocaust memorial in Albany, New York. The essence, the theme of it, of course, is never again. I want to, Rabbi Schneerson, our Lubavitch rabbi, has words of wisdom for all of us. And my parting message to you is to consider your chosen profession as a privilege and a gift, which is what it is. To be an activist with a passion to fix the world. Do not stand idly by. We heard those words just a little while ago. And learn from history as you become the leaders of tomorrow, because you are the leaders of tomorrow. And with that, I thank you very much for being here.
In the interest of time, I think we have to withhold questions now, but you'll be available
Yes,
out in the reception area immediately following.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you all.
And so I'd like to invite Rabbi Krupp so we can, for those of you who plan to leave at 6:30 are close to leaving on time. So, well, ish. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very cognizant of the time, but I have to tell you, Dr. Lozman, this was an incredible presentation on many levels. First of all, I want to offer the Turo undergraduate programs and our students, if you have future expeditions and missions to Poland, the former Soviet Union, I know that our students would benefit from such an experience. I can name you cities and towns that are replete from the Judaic studies that they are engaged in, towns like Volozhin and Brisk and Warsaw and the like. And should you have opportunities for them, I would love to discuss that with you. you mentioned the halachic considerations of rededicating a cemetery. One of the ways you dedicate a cemetery is you actually walk the perimeter. You designate that area. And as you were speaking, I said to myself, well, what benefit could accrue to you and your family? And I think that our rabbis tell us what benefit there is. Because what you were engaged in is chesed shalemis, a kindness that has no means of repayment because the people who you're serving are departed in the next world. So you can't be repaid in monetary goods. So our rabbis tell us that if you engage in such holy endeavors, you and your family should be blessed with good health and long life and prosperity and all good things and all of God's beneficence. So we are in awe of what you've accomplished as an individual. And that's really what I want to share with you in a very brief moment, just what an individual can do as we commemorate Yom Hashoah v'Hagvura. This is a Yom HaZikaron. It's a memorial day for the Holocaust, for those who have departed, and also for acts of heroism. I would be remiss if I did not point out that we are honored to have a member of the Board of Trustees with us, Mr. Ron Poe. And we have members of the administration, deans, members of the staff, and members of our student body, and we thank you all for being here. But we want you to leave here with a message not only of death and destruction and barbarism, but we want you to leave with a message of mission. So I'd like to leave you with two personalities, and then we'll say a prayer for those who were brutally killed during World War II, during the Holocaust. I want to leave you with a message of an individual by the name of Michel Bachor. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. He died at the age of 94 in March of 2019. None of you ever met him. He was honored at his memorial mass in Nice with the playing of the Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem. Captain Bachor was a career pilot, the Air France airline. And he was at the helm, at the controls of Air France Flight 139 in June of 1976. And it took off from Tel Aviv to Athens, and from Athens was supposed to head to Charles de Gaulle Airport. And in Athens, terrorists hijacked the plane. And the plane was told to fly to Benghazi, Libya. And from Benghazi, Libya, came to Entebbe, Uganda. At that time, and still to this day, Israel had a policy of not negotiating with terrorists. All of the passengers disembarked into the old airline terminal. And in the negotiations, as an act of good faith, 148 passengers were separated from the passenger group. And a witness to this recalled the image in your slide of the platform in Auschwitz, where they did selection. You go to the right and to freedom because you're not of Jewish birth. And you to the left, you're going to remain a hostage. And the lead terrorist turns to Captain Bachar and says, "Sir, you and your crew are free to go." Captain Bachar, married to a Muslim woman of Roman Catholic descent, stepped forward and said, "I have a duty to uphold. These are my passengers." And to quote the mayor of Nice in his eulogy for this individual, his duty was to uphold human rights and not to bow to anti-Semitism or to barbarism. We remember today Captain Bachar because he stood up. He stood up in the face of adversity, in the face of bigotry. He's a hero. And we remember him on Yom Hashoah. The other individual I want to mention to you is a man by the name of Rabbi Eliezer Yitzchak Meisel. Because he too was a hero. Different kind of hero. And I want to take you back to April 19th, 1943. We just concluded the holiday of Passover. Anybody who's experienced Passover and the Passover Seder, it's replete with tradition, with family. Probably one of the most wholesome Jewish holidays that you're going to have. There was a recent Pew study that said no matter how assimilated a Jewish individual is, he or she is somehow drawn to the Seder meal. In April of 1943, as a birthday present to Hitler, Himmler declared that the Warsaw Ghetto would be liquidated of all Jews, Judenrein. And the German army had surrounded the Warsaw Ghetto. And on April 19th, because the Germans always seem to want to do things on Jewish holidays, they began to enter the ghetto. And that was the beginning of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising that night, the Seder night. So I want to read you a first-hand account of what occurred in a particular bunker with a particular rabbi, with a particular group of Jews who were facing certain death, insurmountable odds, in the burning wreckage of the Warsaw Ghetto. Amidst this destruction, the table in the center of the room looked incongruous, with glasses filled with what we took for wine, with scattered family members seated around, and the rabbi reading the Haggadah, the traditional text for the Seder meal. Throughout the night, despite the increasing sounds of enemy fire, Tuvia, the witness, and the other fighters held fast, engrossed in the retelling of Jewish people's redemption from Egypt. He recalled The rabbi's reading was punctuated by explosions and the rattling of machine guns. The faces of the family around the table were lit by the red light from the burning buildings nearby. And yet, seated around that table, we were all free Jews celebrating our faith. It takes a lot of willpower. It takes a lot of self-introspection, a lot of heroism to be able to stand up and be proud, even in the face of adversity, persecution, and outright hatred. The reason I mention Rabbi Meisels to you is that I was stunned because a little shtetl outside of San Diego, California, a rabbi with his index finger bandaged because his finger was blown away. The last day of Passover, witnesses gunfire in his sanctuary. Stands up with members of all faiths behind him at a press conference, with the local mayor and the local sheriff. And he declares, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people live, and we will overcome this. And we all collectively will overcome this adversity. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are very few institutions of higher learning under Jewish auspices. It's a personal point of pride and privilege that we have this program on this campus. Because if we're not going to commemorate and we're not going to remember, who will? But as the good doctor said, the purpose of this program, especially for members of our student body, to remember, walk out of this room with a commitment to do, to stand up like Captain Bachar, like the good rabbi in the Warsaw Ghetto, to accomplish, to make this world a better place for all. Please join me in a prayer by standing. As I intone the prayer, both in Hebrew and in English, please feel free to add silently to yourselves the names of those whom you wish to remember on this day, both from the Holocaust, from other acts of adversity on these shores and beyond. Let's hope for a day we don't have to remember so much pain, but we could remember the good that we as individuals and as a collective academic and health community are able to accomplish. El Mali Rachamim, Shochein Bam Romim, Hamtzei Menuchon Al Kanfei Ashchino, B'Malos Kedoshim V'Torim Kizor Rekia Mazhirim Es Nishmas, HaKedoshim V'Atahorim Shehumsu, V'Shenehergu, V'Shenishchetu, V'Shenisrufu, V'Shenitbu, V'Shenechneku, Al Kiddush Hashem, Bavur Shebli Neder, Tinstoch B'Aras Koros Nishmoiseihem, B'Gan Eden Te'ei Menuchas, L'chein Balarachim Yaserim V'Seisei Knofav Li'olamim, Yitzror B'Tzror Achayim Es Nishmoiseihem, Adonai Hu Nachal Losom, V'Yonuchu V'Shalom V'Shkevoseihem V'Neimar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones, who shine like the glow of the firmament. to the souls of those, the holy and pure ones who were killed, murdered, slaughtered, burned, drowned, and strangled in the sanctification of your name. Because each of us here, without making any vows, will contribute to charity and study and do for this world in remembrance of their souls. May their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity. May he bind their souls in the bond of life. The Almighty is their heritage, and may they repose in peace on their resting place. Let us all respond. Amen. Thank you all for coming.